Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Seth Dellinger, and I'm with the Feldenkrais Guild of North America's communication team. This is the Sensibility online newsletter, and I'm delighted to be talking today with Dwight Pargee. And Dwight is a Feldenkrais practitioner and also helps teach other practitioners, is an assistant trainer. He's been teaching the method for nearly 3 decades now, and also has degrees in exercise physiology, sports science, and biomechanics. So first of all, welcome, Dwight.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Yeah,
Good to see you. Seth and I were just talking. We haven't seen each other a few years because of
that's right.
that little pandemic thing. And yeah, it's great. Great
Got
to
in the
read.
way. But
Yeah,
meanwhile, we've all gotten a little more used to Zoom. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah. And
Technology.
this month in Sensibility, one of the things that we're talking about is what happens when people get really inactive, and then maybe however that happened, it comes to an end. They want to get back into activity again, but there's a number of different challenges that could come up. And Dwight, you've had some personal experiences as well as worked with all kinds of clients. But maybe it would just be useful to sort of talk about how you discovered Feldenkrais in the first place and then move into that topic specifically.
Sure. Yeah, I got my interesting story. Like many of us in the method, we're drawn to it because of some personal problems or injury. Way back in the early 90s, I had just got back from playing a couple years of semi-professional rugby in Australia, and I was in our U.S. national player pool trying to make the national team. And I was a first adopter of what we now call post-concussion syndrome. There wasn't even a word for it, but I sure had it. I had about 5 concussions in 2 years. I was young, I was really fit, I was really strong, and I recovered quickly, but I was a little fuzzy. And the saying goes, who's the player? There's a playwright that said Mr. Jones existed a few feet outside of himself. I was a little blurry, right? And
Right.
my background is in strength and conditioning, exercise, sports physiology. And so I was working at a physical therapy clinic in the Bay Area. And one of my wise mentor therapists said, you should go check out this Feldenkrais thing. It might help you a little. I mean, just totally a little nudge. And sure enough, it was like I laid on the floor and did the pelvic clock at a weekend workshop. And it was like the world just came into me, or I came into myself in a way. And I soon started getting individual lessons and doing lessons every day. And it was really the kind of the movement nutrient that I was missing in my life. And this idea of functional integration. Yeah, it was, I went from disintegration to integration pretty quickly. And I happened to be entering into graduate school for biomechanics, and the work I was doing for my graduate studies, I started thinking like, yeah, this Feldenkrais stuff, it's like an applied biomechanics, it's applied science. It's really a method to teach these things in a non-academic way, in an embodied way. And so I entered into a training program, and that
Yeah.
was life-changing.
Can I pause you for a second, just because you had a different kind of a background in movement. So what was it that's, so you mentioned the pelvic clock, which is an awareness through movement lesson where you would have been, presumably a teacher was just guiding you with words, but you also did functional integration, which is the hands-on work. But what were you experiencing that was different from all the other, background?
Yeah, I've been doing, I'm doing everything. It was interesting because that in even now, but in the Bay Area, it was such a rich environment for getting all different types of body work and yoga and Tai Chi. And I was doing martial arts, and I was searching for anything that could get me back to at a performance level that I knew I was missing, but I didn't know what I was missing. And I don't know. It's one of these. I guess in psychology we call it a gestalt opportunity. That it was a holistic feel that I got pretty quickly from the sessions. It was very, very different than these other modalities. So, and what I really appreciated for myself was it gave me a way to work with myself on my own. There was a methodology there during the awareness through movement lessons. And I just found it just really greatly helpful, and it showed in my performance. I was able to come back. I don't know if it was the smartest thing to do, but I went back to playing high level rugby for years.
Get some more concussions.
Yeah. Well, I tried to avoid that. I actually got smarter about where my location of my head was in relation to the rest of myself. So, yeah, I mean, it was in improving body awareness, right? And
Yeah.
spatial awareness, body awareness, these
Mhm.
kind of ideas, but are very, very personal. When you're lacking that, or something's got shifted from impact injuries, it's a very important thing to pay attention to. And even now, even though we're much better with the diagnosis of concussion, the cutting edge is of what to do about it. And
Mm.
so now I actually kind of special. I have many professional athletes that I work with post concussion, because
Mhm.
things that I've learned, and the Feldenkrais method itself is so valuable, and it's not really addressed in the medical physio community at
Mm.
all. And
So,
that's
so
how we work with people. Yeah.
yeah, no, I'm just curious about, so through your own experience and clients with concussion, what are, because, and it sounds like a couple times you've sort of described Feldenkrais as giving kind of like the missing link in
Yeah.
some ways for you. And it sounds like there's something you're saying is typically missing in the way people with concussion are treated. So what were some of those things
Well,
that you discovered?
I would, if somebody has no relation to the Feldenkrais method, I would say one of the things, I have many of my clients who are doing physical therapy for injuries and coming to me, and there's a couple of my colleagues who are cross-trained in physical therapy. So we share a lot of clients, but it's interesting to hear what they're doing and what I'm doing and what they say. And it's also what I believe in practice is the slowness, the gentleness, the precision. It's a learning methodology. We're not just doing exercise, right? It
Right.
actually improves people's ability to move and exercise. But the old saying is, the old joke is, Feldenkrais is like yoga with training wheels. it's getting down to the really basic ingredients of movement first before you layer on these strength and other flexibility things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's often left out. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we can get into the technical reasons why, but that's probably not as important. But it's in addition to it's again, it's a missing ingredient that many people find valuable, and even find it more valuable than what their other things they're doing. So.
Mm-hmm. But I also heard in your story, like, I wanted to get back to playing rugby. And I think this is probably with a lot of athletes, and there's which kind of counteracts the idea of, okay, we're going to go super slow. Like, have you run into that with clients? Like, I just want to get back. How long is this going to take? Or
Absolutely, all the time. Any from my highly paid pro athletes to, I live in Bend, Oregon. Is a very athletic town. It's a mountain ski town. So people live here and move here for the lifestyle. They want to golf, they want to hike, they want to do everything. And so, I work with them. I work with them in a way that we try to progressively get them back to what they want to be able to do. And sometimes they, in that process, and that's part of my art of being a Feldenkrais practitioner. It was like last year, I had a pro level snowboarder who's literally jumping off the top of the mountain, amazingly doing 360s and everything else. And he was 36 and kind of towards the end of his competitive career, and he developed kind of his own personal insight, and he really crashed hard. And so he at first he just wanted to get back up there, and then he was just like, well, maybe there's a smarter way. Maybe I don't have to be so competitive. Maybe, and these are all questions he's coming up with, and not me telling him at all. But and that happened with me, but it took a long time. It took a long time too, personally, because it's part of our, as athletes, it's part of our self-image, and it's really hard to.
right. So you're saying that
but you're like, we want to wish up on anybody, but it's like we say, it's the school of hard knocks, and I've got to graduate degree in the school.
Yeah, I forgot to say that in the introduction, but you told me that you had a PhD in the School of Hard Knocks. So
Yeah. Yeah. So, if I want to add to my resume, then something that you read when you Googled my name is like I had, how long ago was it now? Probably almost 15 years ago, I had a hip replacement, but it was a hip replacement due to rugby injuries previously. About 10 years, I was able to, like, again, put myself back together through Feldenkrais, get myself, it actually dislocated in a game. I dislocated my hip, and I relocated my hip myself because I was already a practitioner on the field. Everyone thought I had been shot by a sniper, and because they heard the bang, they heard the hip.
Yeah, wow.
But it tore the labrum. I learned a lot about hips. I saw the best practitioners in the world. Again, I had no business at that point. I was in my early 40s playing masters rugby. Finally I retired, but and then finally 10 years later I had to have a hip replacement, and then there's a whole story around that, and then my rehab from that was really, really helpful using a Feldenkrais approach. And then my latest thing 5 years ago, and I was teaching in a Feldenkrais training program at the University of Oregon, and a couple of my students that I was working with were sick with a respiratory virus. I got really sick, and middle of the night I lost control of my legs, and it turns out after a week in the hospital, ruled out 23 different things like tumors and meningitis and everything. It turns out I had the respiratory virus caused a lesion on my spine, and I ended up with a spinal injury. So now my project is learning to walk again, actually. I shuffle and hobble. I'm off the walker. I'm off the crutches. I use trekking poles for distance, but it's just gradual progression of learning, trying to get back into myself once again. So,
right.
Who knows what the future brings, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, and I knew a little piece of that story, and we were trying to remember when it was, but sometime just before the pandemic, I was with you in person in Seattle, and I remember how you were just really, what would be the way to say it? Like you were really involved, like you were doing extra awareness through movement lessons all the time, and you were, it seemed like you were really working at it. And I imagine you have been. I mean, can you tell us a little more of just the progression of that over the last 5 years?
So when I met you, that would have been the first year of my injury. So, I was happy to be, because we had been planning that. It was a professional training program. So the group of us have been planning that for a couple of years, been really working on it. It was a model program. And, so I was really excited to be there. And then I had to show up on, barely able to walk up the stairs. And I think I realized, even when I was in the hospital and realizing this was not, for the first few months, it was like I felt every morning when I woke up, I felt like, oh, I'm just going to wake up and be better. I mean, I just expected that. And then I had to come to terms like, okay, this is a longer term. I mean, this is a serious injury. And so I just made it a part of my life. I couldn't work for a while. About 6 months, I couldn't work. And I did multiple lessons, awareness and movement lessons every day. I knew enough about balance and stability and walking gait to, again, find what are the major missing pieces, and just be okay with finding my progression through there. I get many hands-on lessons from various practitioners, and and then I was able to regain enough function where I could start to work with people. And I just started with half days, and I felt if anybody's had or has a chance to get our hands-on functional integration lesson in Feldenkrais, you'll notice that it's not just the person doing something to you, that your practitioner is really working connected to you. And that connection is actually good for me too. I felt if I didn't do too much and I just monitored my own, feeling of vitality and connection and use of myself, I felt better at the end of the day, actually working with people, because of the precision self-use.
Right.
And I continue, and now I'm still working on my own health, but I have a very robust and full practice, and I'm able to travel now. And I just got back from Germany working with Larry Goldfarb, and I was the class demo for it's called the Spinal Engine. It was all about spinal biomechanics, and it was a great week because I was the demo, and I got a lot out of it. And I came back, and all my clients get it right away too. So
Yeah.
I'm fortunate because I can set up my own movement research with myself, and I have a way of sharing that with my people too.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you more about what you just called movement research, because I think in the earlier part of the story, just after I think it was when you were talking about the hip replacement, you also talked about how I discovered that there was a way I could work with myself. And this spinal injury, I imagine, as you say, you're not going to wake up the next day and it's better. But one of the things that we often do in the Feldenkrais method that someone, if they don't have a lot of background watching us might not know this, but I wonder how it might have played a role for you, is the practitioner, whether doing a hands-on lesson or if it's the group work where we're following a verbal instruction, there's a lot of focus on the skeleton, the bones, and the connection to the ground. And of course, if you lost the use of your legs, I mean, I don't know what that was like, but that is our connection to the ground. So was that a factor, like where are my bones, how am I like positioning? Could you just talk about that a bit?
I mean, again, we'll kind of break these down into I like to cook. So cooking metaphors come easy. So look at the ingredients of a recipe. So if you think about what are the ingredients of being upright and mobile, and the ingredients of a walking gait, this idea of ground contact, and the neurological term is proprioception, is the signaling that comes up through our muscles and our joints to our brain, so our brain can control the movements through space. And when that's lacking, that needs to be addressed first, so then my brain can start to figure out how to move my limbs through space to move. And that's exactly where I had to start and continue to. And it's very rich to do Feldenkrais lessons, the awareness through movement lessons, both hands-on and the group lessons, or individual lessons. That it's a proprioceptive, nutrient-rich environment, right? So I'm flooding my system with the missing ingredients, and then I leave it up. My brain sorts it out. My brain and nervous system we're all highly evolved as humans to take that information and put it to use. And it's not a logical, conscious, willpowered thing, right? It's like I know myself now that I can do a lesson, a movement lesson before going to bed, and I know I get good sleep, and I wake up and I feel better because I know so much happens in the deep sleep processes where the consolidation of the neuromuscular learning actually happens. So this idea of rest and recovery, activity and recovery, is so important. I use that with my professional athletes, even when they don't have an injury. Often they're coming to me because they have an injury, but then the relationship continues even when they've recovered. And this idea of active recovery, the Feldenkrais method is wonderful for, and they find it on their off days, and they're sitting in a hotel and somewhere in Manitoba in the middle of winter. They get on the ground, and either I'm Zooming live with them, or they have one of my recordings, and they're working with themselves. And the hockey guys, they play this tremendously long season. I mean, we work. They have a competitive season, but they also have their off season that they're working hard. So we work with them 3-4 months in the off season, and then they went to training camp end of September. They just started their season now, and most of them will finish not till May, if they make the playoffs, or even into June at the end. So of all the professional sports, they've got the longest season, and they fly the greatest air distances all the time. So they found really important for their own recovery, and it's an impact sport. So they're accumulating, multiple impacts in that our bodies take that in.
Right, right. And I mean, sounds like Feldenkrais can be incredibly helpful for all the reasons that you mentioned, and at the same time, an injury, especially if it's like they break a bone or something. I mean, there's just time where you have to wait, you have to heal, and that's part of what we were also curious about to explore this month in sensibility is like, what's the impact of the inactivity? Because as I listen to you, I think, like, I bet a lot of people who had similar injuries as you might not have known what activities I can do, because if you're injured and you try to do too much too soon, then suddenly you're back at square one or even worse. So it seems like there's a fine line.
Yeah, I mean, you never want to just try to jump in and do the kind of, if you're doing your own personal exercise workout and you've coming back from an injury, you need to do it in a progressive way. You don't want to just jump back in and try to do what you were doing before. So here in Bend, I have interesting, I've been here for 20 years, so I have a very varied practice, but there's this great group of active seniors that they've moved to Bend because they want this lifestyle. They're in their retirement years, 60s, 70s, 80s, and they're very active. They love Feldenkrais. It's just like their well-being class they go to. And of course, they all have things that happen. They have cancers and hip replacements and knee replacements. And so then this becomes, a question of like, how do I get back? What can I do? I had a woman that's been coming to my class for about 15 years, and she just had a knee replacement. And my standing advice to my students they ask, well, when can I come see you? And I says, as soon as you can get somebody to bring you here and you feel comfortable, come on in. There's something we can start. So I told her she set the record that there was 4 days post knee replacement surgery. And if you know anything about knee resurgeries and knee replacements, it's outpatient. She was in and out of the surgery center in one day. They had her weight bearing upright that same day. And then 4 days later, she came and saw me. And, she's going to have limitations on what she can do. But the great thing with Feldenkrais is we're not just working with her knee. We're working with all of herself. And already after 4 days of being on a walker and doing her basic PT stuff, she was having all kinds of problems with her hip and her back and her neck and her shoulders. And we found a way that she could be comfortable and lie comfortably and her leg propped up. And basically, I worked non-locally with her in relation to the knee. And she got up and she was like tall and bright and was able to, even on her walker, she wasn't using the walker to support herself. She had self-support. And then she's like, when can I come back? I'm like, I'll see you in a couple of days. It was great. It was the perfect. It was like, I couldn't have paid her to do that, but it was just wonderful. And and it's just good. It's just good. It's just great for that. And we're gonna, over the next few weeks and next 3 months, she has this idea that her daughter lives out at the beach, and she wants to do this beach walk with her daughter at sunset, and she wants to maybe do it in 3 months. I'm like, that's totally doable. That's a good goal. It's a good image to have. Let's find a way that you can, we'll see. But it's not, it wasn't a ridiculous idea, and see how she progresses.
Yeah.
The advantage with her is that she's got 15 years of class lessons in her. It's like her own movement library she's developed. So it's not like starting from scratch. And that's what I found through all my injuries. It's not like, even though I got some severe injuries, I have like almost an internal template that I can draw on. And I have enough, experience and really good team working with me that, it can come together faster.
Yeah. It sounds like with your client, and again, coming back to you, there's a theme here is like, I'm figuring out how my body actually works, how it's, because I mean, most of us can figure out how to, stand up in the first year of life and do this and do that. And we probably just don't think about it until we run into some of these injuries. But it sounds like there's been a lot of detective work along the way. And there was just one thing you said that someone who has less experience with Feldenkrais might not totally have got. So I just wanted to pause you on it.
Yeah.
You said you were working with your client who, had this knee trouble, and you worked with her non-locally. Could you just explain a little more what you mean and
Well,
why that would be helpful?
yeah. So when she goes to physical therapy, it's all everybody from, the person who's checking her in to her therapist, to her therapist assistants. It's all directed at that knee. Everybody's attention, all the exercises are at the knee, right? And it's, you're more than your parts. Everybody is more than their parts. And even when you have an injury, our human beingness is such that we have so many multiple backup systems that we can draw upon. That's evolution. Is I mean, sad to say, but we have many people in our society now who have lost body parts because of war, vets that have come home, major injuries. It's amazing what our bodies can do given the right support, the right sensory information, this idea of repatterning movement. With her specifically, it was a matter of that on that same side, her hip and her back were just in, very shortened and in a lot of spasm, and getting relief from that, getting some openness allowed her then to begin to make that connection from her foot to her knee to her hip to her head. And that's what we do. And that's what's, not to be critical of my colleagues in other professions, but that's what we do, and that's often left out in a way. Or we have a very, very precise ability in our method of doing that. So I always say it's very synergistic. I really like to have my clients, especially with pain problems and some major medical problems. I have a whole group of craniosacral therapists, acupuncturists, physical therapists, even massage therapists that we all can communicate and work together. Not to say that everybody has to have that, but it can be a good approach, right? And we all communicate about like what's going on with people too. So
yeah, I'm also curious about that. Like the experience a person can have, let's just say, in society with an injury, and like, oh, I need to go see a doctor, and then they go from one thing to another. Many people would never find the Feldenkrais method. And as you said, there's this acknowledgement of the whole human being that often isn't there.
Yeah.
And since you were talking about knees, I was thinking of someone I worked with at one point who had a knee injury. And another whole aspect was he was depressed because, he was an athlete and now he couldn't run. And then we uncovered like the way we could say it, he had a conversation with his knee, and it was pretty antagonistic. It was like, you stupid knee. And then like we explored that at one point, and then it turned out that his knee was kind of like, felt like it was being put upon by, the knee owner or something like that. But so
like
the question of like
family therapy or something.
Right. Yeah. Right. But yeah, the question of the motivation or just the psychological experience of injury and inactivity, and then trying to come back, maybe come back, and I do try to come back a little too fast. I re-injure myself. Like, what's your experience been with that? Your experience with clients?
Yeah. Well, I mean, just from my own, I can only speak from my own personal experience, and it's just like, being hurt, being injured, it just sucks. There's nothing great about it. I look back and go, well, of course, look at all the stuff I've learned. I know about so much about, balance and stability and pelvises and, spinal engine, everything. It's like I've learned from it, and I never want to wish that upon anybody. And I get a little grumbly when people say, "Oh, that's okay. You're learning. It's a learning situation for you." It's like, no, no, no. You don't want to tell people that at all. And that's part of it. It's part of it, of course, because we've been injured. It doesn't just injure us physically; it injures us at all our levels, emotionally, and dealing. Yeah, I mean, it's like I've had my down dark abyss days, and I'm lucky that I have a methodology that even when I feel like that, and even when I mean, literally, I had when I was in the hospital for this last spinal thing, I was there for a week just doing testing, spinal tap, full body brain MRI, everything. I mean, they were just poking and prodding me, trying to figure out what was going on. How did you lose your legs overnight? I mean, it was literally an overnight, like woke up in the middle of the night, and I did, and it's very disorienting. So I had my wonderful wife Maru just bring my mat to the hospital room, and I just said, well, I don't know what's going on, but I have a template of how I know I want to be. And there's these lessons in our Feldenkrais, our hymnal, or thousands of lessons, movement lessons that we have. And there's a small group of them called the primary image, which are based on these 5 cardinal lines. And I started there. And it's like, that's my template. I got to fill in. It was literally like, paint by numbers. Is like, this is the missing part, and I got to figure out something, how to fill that image in. And that gave me, now I can call it like this idea of biological optimism, where I can do something, and then I can feel that was helpful. And then, and then I can add to that and build on it. There's these times of just plateau when it seems like not much is changing, but I still know in myself that if I just the accumulation of these movement experiences, this proprioceptive rich environment, it grows. I grow with that, and then a lot of it is like I had to give up on, like, okay, it's gonna be better tomorrow, right? This idea of like, it's a long-term project. I don't know where it's going to lead to, and to come to terms with that. I mean, that was part of my process too. And I in my practice, I think I help people navigate that too, of like not being so time determined. It's maybe not next week, but if they can feel success. I mean, Stephen, I don't know if you ever worked with Stephen Rosenholtz. He's one of my mentor teachers, a brilliant Feldenkrais trainer, and he remembers something he taught me. He said, the small successes breed confidence. And so it's like these small successes, like when my client got up and she was able, even on her walker, to stand. I mean, she just had very light touch, so she was using her leg for support. She felt it, and her eyes lit up, and she's like, yeah, I'm going to be okay. I mean, her whole attitude literally changed. Do you know what attitude, the French meaning of attitude is?
No, I never heard that.
No. So you look it up. Look up attitude, and in the dictionary there'll be like, I think there's about 4 major definitions. So it comes from French attitude, and it's what Moshe Feldenkrais used. It means like an airplane position in space, your attitude in space, right? And it's interesting how we don't really use it a whole lot in the English language, but other languages use this, of like your idea of like your Feldenkrais call it acture. We call it like our posture, our position in space has to do with how we feel.
Yeah, right.
So if I'm hunched over and I'm shuffling along and literally dragging myself, so that's a certain attitude that I'm doing, and that's a certain feeling that's provoking. And when I get off the table with someone working with me, or I do a lesson on my own, and I get up and I feel a better sense of support and better sense of integration and connecting with myself, that's a different attitude. And I try to my personal practice, I just try to cultivate that every day, knowing that I want to feel like this and not like that. So.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense because if the journey back to health or to more activity or wherever, the walk on the sunset with the daughter, if it's a long way away, then I'm going to need to be motivated not just today but tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And like to hear that you had your wife bring the mat to the hospital even when you didn't know what's going on, it just gave me a sense of like, okay, well, you didn't totally lose agency. I mean, you lost the use of your legs, but you didn't totally lose agency. And then your client who feels that much better, it's like a leaning in. I guess that's what you're calling the attitude. So,
Yeah,
and a lot of people probably never get that. They
right.
probably just get stuck in the mud, and then it's more like
Yeah,
going the other direction day after day.
yeah, it could be very frustrating if you don't have something to grasp or connect
Mm-hmm.
with. So
Mm-hmm.
I try to really learn from that and offer that
Mm-hmm.
relationship to my clients.
Mm-hmm.
It's so important. It's so important, and I try to keep it open ended like that because we don't always know these outcomes with these more serious things. And it's the idea, maybe going back to one of your original questions on coming out of injury or inactivity, where to start. We start where we're at, right? And I try to meet the person where they're at and then see what do they want to do, what's their intention, and then we work together, right? And sometimes that end intention, I try to use the reversibility principle, not getting, sometimes that changes and it changes and through the process too. Sometimes it happens, we thought like something's going to happen in 3 months and something that happens in 2 weeks. So it goes both ways. We just got to be open. We don't know, and that's okay. I like to be the Columbo. I like to be detective, the stumbling detective,
Yeah.
mucking around in the fog.
But it
I like
sounds like
that's a
having,
great analogy. Yeah.
yeah, it sounds like having something out there that I'm headed towards, but
Yep.
maybe with a little bit of a flexibility in how fast I'm going to get there or if I'm going to maintain that. But it seems like there's something important about sort of setting something that's in the future as a goal. Would you?
Yeah. So Moshe Feldenkrais talked about this a little bit. He touched on many things, and he called it the image of achievement. So he said his job for somebody. I mean, people were coming, especially at the end of his career, his life. People were coming from, he's world renowned now, and so people with very very severe brain injuries and neurological problems were coming to see him, and he described it once as he wanted to hold the image of achievement. He was able to, like, through his conversation and touch with the person, to create this idea of like, what could this person possibly achieve in the future, and that became his kind of working template and
Mm,
how he described it. And it's a really interesting idea of this idea of how in the Feldenkrais method we can first start with an intention and then try to link the movement and the actions to get to the point of fulfilling the intention.
mm,
And,
mm,
and it's very sometimes fuzzy and soft because sometimes that intention change, but it's good to have an idea. It is good something to work with. I'm a lifelong, fisherman, a fly fisherman, and I go to the river now and I know where I want to wade and what I need to do to go down that river and be able to wade. I can't do it right now, but
mm,
I know what I want to do, and that drives me. I know there's walks and hikes, and I live in a beautiful mountain town, and I know that view up on the top of that ridge, and I look at
mhm,
it every day. It's like, okay, that's what I want to get back to. So that's motivational too, to have some type of image that you're working
mhm.
towards. And then you got to be neurologically diplomatic with yourself too. you know it's you can't use just depend on the willpower to get there. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I wonder. Do you want to just say a few more sentences? Neurologically diplomatic. I'm sure for some people they'd be like,
Yeah.
what's that?"
Well, it's I think I've thrown out a couple of phrases that are really important for the way I see things, is this idea of biological optimism, right? How the small little changes in our system, that's the trust in our own, one of the things that happens when you have a severe injury, any kind of injury, is sometimes we lose faith in ourselves or lose confidence in, like, oh, I'm out of control. Oh, I have no, this thing is happening to me. My knee is doing this, kind of a thing. There's a disconnect. And there's a feeling, calling biological optimism, that I get, and many of my clients experience too, after doing lessons, is like the sense of wholeness and things are okay. And we have this biological intelligence. It's our consciousness is just a small part of that. A lot of this is happening underneath the conscious radar, and you learn to trust that. So the idea of being neurologically diplomatic is, it's the lost art of diplomacy nowadays, is right, is this idea of like proposing something, but also listening for what a counter proposal, and this idea of diplomacy with ourselves. So, put something out there, see how it settles, what the effect was, and then it's an ongoing conversation with myself and with the people I work with too. That's how I understand neurological diplomacy.
Got it. Yeah, that's great. Well, this has been great, Dwight. I really appreciate just hearing more of your personal story and sort of fleshing out what it looks like, both physiologically, but also just like, the psychological project of recuperation. I don't know, just want to see if you have any final thoughts or last words for someone, maybe, thinking of a person who has less familiarity with the Feldenkrais method.
Yeah, I would just say, don't listen to much of that I say. If something strikes your interest, just go check it out. The thing about Feldenkrais weekend, it's like the elephant and the blind men, is everyone's trying to describe it. It's very experiential. It's very first person, whole body thing. Find a lesson online and lay down and do it, or find a practitioner to go to work with and go have a few lessons with, and just be open to the experience. But it most likely, it's not what you think. Literally not what you think, because it's going to be out of your experience until you experience it. And then, and I think it'll be really helpful, especially if you're coming injured or coming out of an injury, or major sickness or something. It's one of these things that it's the one, I can't think of a better thing to do, along with many other things, but it's often the missing piece. So give it a try, and feel free to contact me, and if you have questions, for sure. Absolutely. If
Great.
you want to put my information in the,
we can do that.
My website, it has my contact on it. You can come to I Zoom now because of the pandemic. I'm doing live classes, but I'm also Zooming them live and supply recordings to people too. So you can do that.
Great.
See me, people come see me. I go see them.
I love too what you said about, like, it might not be what you think, but like, it seems like part of your story has been, I just kept trying things that I didn't quite know what it would do, but you keep doing that, you keep exploring. And so that seems like a really
well, yeah, that's the other thing I've learned with myself, and I try to evoke that with my clients, is idea of following your curiosity. Feldenkrais would say, like, it was one of the indicators of a healthy person is how curious they were, right? And when we lose our curiosity, that's a whole nother problem. So maybe if you can find something to be curious about and follow your curiosity, that will lead you to new places. So that's all the wisdom I got.
Well, I thought that was pretty
that's
good.
All I got. That's all I got for you.
All right. Well, I'll let you go. Thanks so much, Dwight.
What a pleasure, Seth. Thanks so much. Nice way to reconnect, and please let's stay in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. Take care.
Okay.